Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Dan Blanchard with the Traveling Time with Dan show, where we mix travel with history and with leadership, and of course with me, Dan Blanchard. Today I'm here in Boston at Griffin's Wharf, the corner of Pearl Street and Atlantic Ave. Now this place has a fascinating and impactful history for New England, Boston, and for basically the United States, right? I remember reading about the last survivor of the Boston Tea Party. His name was George Robert 12 Hughes. Yeah, long name, right? He was the last one. And he talks about that night on December 16th, 1773, about how him and a bunch of the Sons of Liberty, right? They dressed up as Indians, Mohawks, all that, mostly Mohawks, and took 3 hours raiding the 3 ships and dumping all that tea into the harbor in an act of protest. Not thievery, not vandalism, but an act of protest, okay? Now, some people say, well, hold on a second. This wasn't even a military target. Is that fair? Well, yes, all is fair in love and war, right? It was a commercial target that brought in a lot of money, right? It was ran through the East Indian Company, which basically controlled about half of the world's trade and about 10% of England's GDP. So you hit them in the pocketbook, right? You hit them in the pocketbook, and it makes it harder for them to wage an all-out full war on you because they just don't have the easy access to money, all right? So how did this all start? Well, there was the Tea Act of 1773, right? And the Townshend duties that went on it. And basically, the American colonies could only buy tea from England. And they had to pay a tax on that tea, all right? And they didn't want to pay a tax on that tea, all right? And there was a real legal confrontation going down here. Because on this wharf, right here, this used to all be water, by the way, and it was filled in with dirt and gravel during the land reclamation project, right? This used to all be water, but it's been filled in. But anyways, let's look at this, right? We've got this legal confrontation. We got what would have been boats and water right here, okay? You can see behind me is the Boston Tea Party Museum, and that's where the water is today. But in the old days, again, the water was like here, okay? So you got this legal confrontation going on, right? And they've got like 21 days to unload these boats and then collect the duties. But the Sons of Liberty have been standing guard and not allowing the boat to be unloaded. Boat's not unloaded, I guess you can't pay any taxes, right? All right, so that's what's going on. The Sons of Liberty are not allowing it, all right? Now, what's going to happen is on day 21, the English Navy, which is like just perched right out here in the water, the English Navy's probably going to do something about it. Probably going to come in and forcibly unload it and then forcibly collect the taxes, right? So what's happening is on the night, the 20th day, on that night, there's a huge meeting at the Old South Meeting House, right? And that's when Sam Adams gives the nod, right? Nothing more this meeting could do to save the country or whatever. So there it is, right? The Sons of Liberty are off, right? They're off, dressed as Indians, and they're going to the wharf here. Again, this used to be water, right? This was like a dock, part of the Boston Harbor, right? Griffin's Wharf. They come here, and they board 3 ships, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, and they're going to dump 342 cases of tea into the water. It's going to take them about 3 hours. And, the last survivor of them, George Robert 12 Hughes, says, there were the English Navy boats were there, and they just didn't see them or just didn't stop them. And they were just dumping the water in there. And so they were actually even hooping, making pretend they were like Native Americans, Indians, indigenous, hooping, right? Woo, 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 like that. And it was just like, okay, well, how did like the English Navy not hear them and come over and try to stop them? But they didn't. And when it was 3 hours later, they had dumped 92,000 pounds of English tea into the harbor. That was worth, the money, basically worth 10,000 English pounds, right? That like really hurt England. It really did hurt England when they did that. And of course, their whole thing was, we're not going to pay the tax. We're not going to be tricked into paying the tax, even if the tea was a little bit cheaper through the Tea Act of 1773. We're not going to do it. You're not going to trick us into doing, because listen, there's no taxation without representation was basically their cry. Right? That was their motto. We're not going to do it. We're not going to pay the taxes, right? Of course, stepping on any one of those three boats was considered an act of treason, right? Dumping that in there. Treason, death by hanging, right? So England called it treason. The colonists called it patriotism, right? Again, England called it treason. The colonists called it patriotism, right? And the colonists wanted to make sure that the English knew that this was an act of protest. It wasn't a thievery thing. It wasn't a vandalism thing. It was an act of protest, all right? It's even said that the Sons of Liberty swept up the deck, cleaned everything up, made everything look nice to show the English that this was a disciplined act of protest and nothing more. And there should be no taxation without representation. And this right here was a huge turning point in the relationships between England and the colonists at Griffin's Wharf, right? All right, so England, of course, is going to punch back. They're going to come up with the coercive acts, which the colonists called the Intolerable Acts. They're going to close the Boston Harbor. They're going to basically close down Boston, isolate Boston, make them feel a lot of financial pain, and hope that Boston just gives in. But it doesn't go that way, all right? A lot of the colonies come to the aid of Boston, right? And they smuggle in goods, food and goods and all that stuff to keep Boston going, right? Now, not all the colonies. There was a few colonies, maybe especially a couple down south, that were like, Boston, come on, stop bothering England. Just stop it. Leave them alone. You guys are being like huge troublemakers. You're causing trouble for all of us. Just stop it. But the majority of the colonies were on Boston's side against what the English were doing. All right? Majority were on side. All right? So again, I want to point out this location, this beautiful plaque right here in Griffin's Wharf at the corner of Pearl Street and Atlantic Ave. And remind you, listen, this was water. This was all water right here. This was the wharf, right? Where the 342 teachers were dumped in the water, right? Now the water's pushed out. Water's pushed out some. Some people say a couple blocks. The water's pushed out, whatnot, but it's definitely pushed out some. And right there today is the Boston Tea Party Museum. Now, you know, when I do these episodes, I like to combine travel with history and leadership. So the waterfront in Boston is just amazing. If you have not come down and seen this waterfront, come down here, walk here, get some food, hang out, take some time here, and really just take in the waterfront. It's just amazing, all right? History, I've already given you a bunch. Want some more history? Right there over my shoulder is the Boston Tea Party Museum. Definitely come and check that out. You can learn so much about the Boston Tea Party and Griffin's Wharf that is no longer here, of course. And what's the leadership? Well, the leadership is this. Leadership is not just about passion. It's also about self-control, planning, and teamwork, and perhaps even sweeping the deck. That's right. Be a clean leader. Right? Okay. So anybody, thank you for spending time with me today on the Travel on Time with Dan show, where we mix travel with history, leadership, and of course with me, Dan Blanchard. Be back real soon with another cool episode. And until then, take care.